Hello there, welcome to Just About Space. Imagine a planet that by all accounts, by every law of physics and probability, should not be here anymore. A world that has danced with destruction, that should have been torn apart long before you or I ever looked up at the night sky. And yet it still lingers. Its orbit remains. Its story continues. Space is not a gentle place. Stars explode. Planets collide, orbits decay, and time is ruthless. Across billions of years, almost everything that can happen out there eventually will, so when we stumble upon a world that somehow defies those odds, that continues to circle its star when it should have been reduced to rubble, it forces us to ask a question: what went wrong with our math, or what went right with reality? Tonight, you'll drift with me into the story of such a planet, a fragile survivor, a cosmic mystery, a reminder that even the universe, in all its endless destruction, leaves behind echoes of survival where none should exist. Close your eyes, picture it, a planet wrapped in silence, older than it has any right to be, a world that feels like a ghost of something that should have ended long ago. And as we drift toward it, let's begin to understand why this planet should not still be here, and why, against all odds, it is. You drift outward, far from the familiar spiral arms where our own star resides, and into the quieter neighborhoods of the galaxy. Here, the light feels thinner, more fragile, like an old photograph that has been handled too many times. You imagine yourself gliding through that vast silence, a silent passenger carried by curiosity, until a world comes into view. A world you already know should not be here. It is not a flashy planet. There is no grand system of rings encircling it, no neon storms raging across its surface, no endless oceans glowing in the night. To the naked eye, it looks ordinary, and maybe that is the first strange thing about it. Because so many planets that survive long enough to draw our attention wear their survival like scars. Gas giants scorched by their stars, ice worlds cracked by gravity's grip, Earth-like bodies marred by cratered histories of violence. But this one, it lingers in quiet defiance. Billions of years ago, the laws of orbital mechanics all but guaranteed its end. It circles a star that is ancient, a star that has already outlived the typical stability window for planetary survival in its system. The gravitational tug of nearby giants should have pulled this smaller world into chaos. Resonances, the invisible music of orbits, should have amplified until its path fractured. At the very least, collisions with rogue asteroids, passing debris, or even the inevitable tidal stresses of its own sun should have dismantled it into rubble. Statistically, this planet should not be here. And yet, when astronomers turned their instruments toward this part of the sky, they found it calm, steady, orbiting as if it had nowhere else to be. You can almost imagine the first time its discovery was confirmed. Somewhere on Earth, a room full of scientists stared at the data, blinking at a world that their models had all erased. Because that's the thing about models. They work until they don't, and the universe has never been shy about humbling us. What does it mean for a planet to survive when it shouldn't? Survival in space is rarely about luck. It is about balance. About being caught in the fragile in-between of cosmic forces that should tear you apart, but somehow cancel one another out. Imagine a tightrope walker wrenching across a wire in a storm, leaning just enough against the wind to stay upright. One shift, one wobble, and it's over. And yet, this planet has been walking that wire for billions of years. It forces you to think of Earth. How many catastrophes we have already survived. Asteroid impacts, near misses, the fury of our own unstable star. There's something almost unsettling in realizing that survival may have less to do with design and more to do with improbability. Our planet too should not be here in its current state. It should have been sterilized, cracked or abandoned by now, and yet here we sit, breathing, thinking, asking questions about a distant world that reflects our own strange persistence. As you picture the planet, you wonder what it looks like up close. Perhaps its surface is scarred with the evidence of near-death, ancient fractures, tectonic seams that nearly split it apart, impact basins that should have ended its history but didn't. Or perhaps it is smoother, a quieter place where survival has erased the scars of violence, leaving only the illusion of calm. Whatever the case, its existence is a paradox written in stone. Think about how the universe handles time. Stars burn out, galaxies collide, black holes eat everything that comes too close. And yet here, in the middle of all that destruction, a single planet manages to persist. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't radiate impossibility. It just remains, like a whisper you can barely hear but can't ignore. Astronomers debate how. Some argue it is the result of gravitational coincidence, nearby giant planets that should have destabilized its orbit, but instead protect it, like cosmic bodyguards. Others believe the planet itself might be more massive than it appears, its gravity anchoring it against chaos. And some wonder whether there are forces we do not yet understand, subtle laws at play in orbital mechanics that only reveal themselves in rare, delicate cases like this. Whatever the explanation, the mystery deepens. Not only is this planet here, it is teaching us something about survival itself. And maybe that's the larger story. Not just the mechanics of why this one planet outlived its odds, but what it symbolizes. In a universe where destruction is the default, survival becomes a kind of rebellion. Every rock, every moon, every orbit that resists the tide of entropy for a little longer than expected feels like a small miracle. This planet is not just an astronomical oddity. It is a reminder that improbability is woven into the fabric of existence. You close your eyes and imagine standing on its surface, though you know you never will. The sky above would hold its ancient star dimmer now, more weary than it was billions of years ago. Perhaps the air, if there is any, would feel thin, carrying the weight of a history that should have ended long before your visit. And beneath your feet, the ground would seem impossibly steady, as if the planet itself knew how close it came to erasure, and clings to existence with a quiet, stubborn will. It makes you wonder how many other planets like this are out there. Survivors that our instruments haven't yet found. Worlds that are supposed to be gone but remain, hidden in the shadows of forgotten corners of space. And if there are many, what does that say about survival itself? Maybe it is not as rare as we think. Maybe improbability is not the exception, but the rule. For now, though, you are left with this one. A planet that should have been destroyed, but wasn't. A survivor of cosmic violence. A contradiction orbiting quietly in the endless dark. And as you drift away, you can't help but feel that you've just looked at a mirror, not of Earth as it is, but of Earth as it has always been. Fragile, improbable, lingering where it should not be. You drift closer, letting your imagination hover just above the strange world. You begin to trace its story backwards, peeling away time like layers of old paint. You see it not as it is, but as it must have been, a planet tossed in a storm of gravity. Its fate sealed, or so it should have been billions of years ago. The first thing you notice is the math. Orbital mechanics does not care about survival or destruction. It is not merciful. It is not cruel. It is simply numbers, forces, and inevitabilities. When multiple planets share a star, their orbits begin to tug on one another, tiny nudges that grow larger over time. In this system, that should have meant collapse, a chain reaction, a spiral into chaos. That is what the numbers predicted. And yet, here you are, staring at a world that slipped through the cracks of probability. You imagine the early days of this star system, the star itself, young and fierce, burning with more violence than stability. Clouds of dust and gas circled it, clumping into bodies, colliding, shattering, reforming. This planet would have been born into a frenzy, a fragile ball of molten rock, cooling too slowly, struck again and again by debris. Each collision was a test of survival. Each impact could have rewritten its story. At least once, perhaps, the planet was almost obliterated, shattered into fragments that somehow recoalesced, as if the universe gave it a second chance. And then, as the system settled, came the giants, gas worlds forming nearby, their gravity bending space itself, disturbing every smaller orbit around them. To exist near a gas giant is to live in constant fear. The slightest change in timing, the slightest wobble in orbit, and the smaller world is cast outward into the void, or inward to a fiery end. This planet, by all odds, should have suffered that fate. Its neighbors grew large, heavy, domineering, but instead of consuming it, they formed a delicate shield. Their gravitational pulls cancelled out at just the right angles, holding the smaller planet in a precarious equilibrium. Think about that for a moment. If one gas giant had formed slightly closer, if another had been just a little more massive, this planet would have been erased billions of years ago. Its survival rests on razor-thin margins, cosmic coincidences stacked like cards, and yet those cards did not fall. They balanced impossibly, leaving this single world intact. You can almost feel the tension of that survival in your bones. The idea that everything is held together not by strength but by fragile alignments. It reminds you of Earth again, how our own moon formed from a violent collision, stabilizing our tilt, calming our tides. How Jupiter, out there in the distance, became a shield, catching comets and asteroids before they could strike us. How chance alignments and accidents of history gave us the time we needed to evolve, to breathe, to wonder. Survival once again balanced on a knife's edge. But this planet's knife is sharper, more improbable, more unlikely, and still it walks that wire. Scientists who study it wonder how much longer it can last. Will the balance break tomorrow? 1,000,000 years from now? 1,000,000,000? Or will it continue stubbornly resisting all odds until the star itself burns out? You picture the last day of this planet, some day in the future when the fragile equilibrium finally cracks. Perhaps the star swells into a red giant, pulling the planet inward until it dissolves into fire. Or maybe one of its larger neighbors drifts, nudged by unseen forces, and gravity finally wins, tearing this small survivor apart. Survival, after all, cannot last forever, but until then, it lingers. What makes its story so compelling is that you can feel the echoes of your own. Humanity has always imagined permanence, but in truth, we too survive by improbable balances. Our climate is held stable by delicate feedback loops. Our orbit is just far enough from the sun to avoid freezing or burning. The great catastrophes of our past missed us, barely. And when you realize how close we skate to destruction, this strange planet becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of what it means to survive in a universe built for collapse. You imagine looking up at its sky. If you could, the star overhead would seem heavy, dim with age. Perhaps the color of its light would be strange, more orange, more swollen than the youthful white of our sun. Shadows would stretch longer. The ground might be cracked, weathered by eons. Yet even here, on a planet that was not supposed to exist anymore, the sky would still open wide, and the stars would still shine above it. Survival does not erase beauty. Sometimes it deepens it. As you float away from the surface in your mind, you begin to sense something else. A lesson, written not in language but in silence, that even in the heartless mathematics of the cosmos, improbability has a place, that sometimes the survivors are the ones who do not belong, and that perhaps the story of the universe is not only one of collapse, but of persistence, quiet and unlikely, written into the orbits of worlds like this. The thought lingers. Perhaps Earth itself is just another of these improbable planets, a survivor where none should be, and maybe the real miracle is not that this distant world still exists, but that we are here to notice it, drifting in the silence, wondering why destruction has not yet come. You hover in orbit, staring down at the planet as if it were a riddle carved into the fabric of space. The more you look at it, the more its existence feels like a quiet defiance of everything we think we know. Astronomers call it stable, But stability here does not mean peace. It means standing in the middle of a storm without being swept away. From a distance, its orbit looks smooth, one revolution after another, tracing the same path around its aging star. But the closer you examine it, the more fragile that path becomes. Every orbit is slightly different. Minute variations, invisible to the naked eye, ripple through its trajectory. Astronomers measure these fluctuations and see something astonishing by every model. Those ripples should have grown into waves, tearing the planet from its orbit long ago, and yet they never did. You begin to think about chaos theory. The universe, for all its laws, is still a place of sensitivity. A system can be thrown into chaos by the smallest change. The angle of an orbit, the speed of a rotation, the tug of a passing object. For this planet, chaos should have been inevitable. Imagine a pencil balanced on its tip, unmoving, for billions of years. That is what you are seeing. A cosmic impossibility stretched across time. Some researchers suspect that the explanation lies in resonance. In the great dance of celestial bodies, resonance is the hidden rhythm that shapes their fates. When planets orbit in exact ratios, say one completes 2 orbits in the time another completes 3, those rhythms can stabilize what should otherwise be chaos. It is like 2 swings moving in harmony. Push at the right time, and you keep them steady. Push at the wrong time, and you send them crashing. This planet, they think, may be caught in one of those rare harmonic webs, its every wobble corrected by the counterpull of its neighbors. If true, then its survival is not random at all. It is music, silent music, written in gravity. And yet, even that explanation feels incomplete, because the resonance itself should have collapsed long ago under the sheer pressure of time. Stars shift, masses drift, orbits bleed energy. Nothing stays exact forever. So how, then, does the music still play? You imagine it as a delicate mechanism, like a watch left ticking on a windowsill. Dust gathers, gears shift, but somehow, against all odds, it keeps time. Perhaps there are corrections happening that we cannot yet see. Perhaps there are hidden forces, dark matter, subtle drags of cosmic currents that keep nudging the planet back into place when it strays too far. Whatever the reason, you are forced to admit there is more here than we understand. It brings you to another unsettling thought. If survival like this is possible, then perhaps our understanding of probability itself is flawed. Astronomers often speak in odds, 1 in a billion, 1 in a trillion, practically impossible. But when the universe contains uncountable billions of stars, practically impossible begins to lose meaning. Improbable things do not just happen, they are guaranteed somewhere, sometime. This planet is proof of that. Proof that improbability is not the same as impossibility. And as you think about that, you feel something shift inside you. Because if improbable survival is real out there, then perhaps it is real here too. Perhaps Earth's own long endurance is not a stroke of freak luck, but simply one of the inevitabilities of an infinite cosmos. Somewhere, worlds are destroyed on schedule. Somewhere else, worlds survive when they shouldn't. Ours is one of the survivors, and so is this quiet planet orbiting its weary star. You close your eyes and listen, imagining the rhythm of its orbit, a planet circling, a star breathing, a system holding its balance. Out here, survival feels less like a miracle and more like a whisper of a larger truth, that the universe, in all its destruction, also makes room for things that should not exist. From its surface, if you could stand there, the sky would hold reminders of that danger. Perhaps you would see the great bulk of nearby giants rising over the horizon, massive and terrible, their presence a constant threat. And yet those same giants may be the very reason the planet still exists, pulling it into harmony instead of chaos. Danger and protection, destruction and survival, written into the same story. It makes you think of how many times Earth has faced extinction from the very forces that also sustain it. The sun giving life with its warmth, but always holding the power to burn it away. Jupiter guarding us from comets while occasionally hurling smaller ones inward. The line between enemy and ally is thin in space. As you drift further from the planet, you find yourself humbled. This world is not just surviving, it is surviving visibly, in defiance of every expectation. And that means that every time we map the sky, every time we run the equations, we are still missing something essential, something that lives between the numbers. Maybe the planet is not the strange part. Maybe the strange part is us, trying to measure infinity as though it should follow our rules. The universe was not built to be predictable. It was built to be vast, and in vastness, impossibility dissolves into inevitability. And so you look at the planet one last time, a small world circling its ancient star, not remarkable in its colors, not spectacular in its composition, and yet, because it exists at all, it becomes one of the most remarkable things you have ever seen. A planet that should not be here, a survivor orbiting in silence, carrying its improbable existence into another day, another year, another billion years, until the balance finally breaks. But for now, it remains. And as you let yourself drift away from it, you realize the truth it has been whispering all along. Survival is not about certainty, it is about persistence in the face of impossible odds. And sometimes, even in the most unforgiving corners of the cosmos, persistence is enough. You let yourself sink into the thought. This planet is not just an object in space, it is a message written in stone and silence, circling endlessly around a star that should have outlived it. Every time it completes an orbit, it is like a clock striking a note. It was never supposed to reach tick, another billion years. Tick, another defiance of the odds. You think about how many times it could have ended. Billions of years stretch long, and within that span disasters are not possibilities. They are certainties. Debris rains down across planetary systems like stray arrows loosed in a war. Gravitational tides pull relentlessly, stretching orbits until they fray. Stars themselves evolve, their brightness shifting, their fury building. A planet's survival is rarely about permanence. It is about making it through each moment without being unmade. For this one, each moment has been a gamble. It could have been struck by a massive asteroid, its surface reduced to molten chaos. It could have been nudged slightly inward by its giant neighbors, tumbling toward its star until it burned away. Or it could have been pushed outward, exiled into the cold, dark, frozen and forgotten. Each of those fates was not only possible but likely, and yet none of them came. Not yet. The more you sit with it, the more you realize how fragile the concept of inevitability really is. We call things inevitable because our math tells us so, because the probability curves lean heavily in one direction, but inevitability is only hindsight dressed as prophecy. This planet is proof. It was inevitable that it would be gone by now, and yet it is still here. You wonder how many of our own predictions about the universe, about ourselves, carry the same flaw. Astronomers speak of this planet in cautious tones. They call it a survivor, but the word does not feel big enough. Survival suggests endurance. But this is more than that. This is persistence against numbers, against odds so staggering they might as well have been called impossible. If survival is the act of making it through danger, persistence is the act of rewriting the danger itself. This world has not just survived, it has endured beyond the narrative the universe wrote for it. And that forces you to think of us again. Humanity, Earth. You walk on a planet that, like this one, was supposed to fall many times before you ever arrived. Entire epochs of disaster have brushed past us. Asteroids large enough to strip oceans, solar flares strong enough to burn away atmospheres, ice ages deep enough to extinguish life. By probability alone, we should not be here, but improbability has a way of carving space for itself. Even in a cosmos that appears ruthless, perhaps we too are a resonance, a balance, a survivor's echo. From orbit, you picture what the surface might feel like under your feet. The ground would hum with age, not the kind of age you can measure in years, but the kind that seeps into stone itself. A planet that has survived too long is heavy with silence. No wind could erase it. No erosion could disguise it. You would feel it in the way the land stretched, in the way the horizons seemed endless and weary, and maybe, just maybe, there would be a comfort in that silence. To stand on a world that defied destruction is to stand on the side of improbability itself. But survival has its shadows. If a planet outlasts its expectations, it also becomes a ghost of what it was supposed to be. Imagine the histories that never came to pass. Imagine the moons it should have lost, the atmospheres it should have burned away, the oceans that should have boiled or frozen. Each near catastrophe is a phantom written into its rocks, a scar carved into its orbit. To look at it is to look at all the endings that almost happened. It is a monument not just to survival but to all the losses it avoided by chance. You begin to realize in the end, this is not just a story about one planet. It is about all planets, about all survival. The universe is not designed to preserve. It is designed to change, to erode, to collapse. And yet within that design there is space for rebellion, for a planet to keep circling, for a species to keep breathing, for improbability to become reality. And so you linger on this thought. Perhaps survival in the cosmos is not an accident but a rhythm, not predictable, not certain, but inevitable in its own way. Given enough planets, enough stars, enough time, some will defy the odds, some will cling where none should. And maybe that is the deepest truth this planet offers. Not that it is a miracle, but that miracles are simply inevitabilities we have not yet accounted for. As you drift farther out, the planet shrinks in your view, becoming nothing more than a pale circle against its dim star. It looks small, vulnerable, temporary, and yet its presence whispers louder than its size. I should not exist, and yet I do. I should have fallen, and yet I stand. You let the thought settle into you, the way starlight does when it travels billions of years only to meet your eyes for a brief moment. Fragile, improbable, persistent. You wonder how many other such whispers fill the sky, how many planets circle quietly, unremarkable in their appearance but extraordinary in their survival, how many we will never see, because they are too far, too faint, too small. But even if we never find them, you know they are there, because improbability demands it, because survival insists on finding a way. And with that, you let the silence of space surround you. One planet, one orbit, one improbable story stretched across billions of years, a reminder that the universe is not only destruction, it is also persistence, and sometimes that persistence is enough to outlast the odds. You let your gaze drift from the planet itself to the star that rules its sky. Ancient, weary, its light is softer now than it was when the system was young. Stars, after all, do not burn with eternity. They are engines of fire that live, age, and eventually die. And this one has been burning for longer than Earth has existed. By every account, its lifespan should have long ago stripped its planets bare. When stars grow older, they do not grow gentler. They brighten, slowly but inevitably, pouring more heat into the space around them. For planets orbiting close enough, that brightness is a death sentence. Atmospheres thicken with heat until they choke. Oceans boil, then vanish. Surfaces crack and split, unable to cool. This planet should have been undone by that long, steady increase in light. And yet it has not. Astronomers wonder if its orbit shifted outward at just the right pace. Perhaps it was nudged by its giant neighbors, slowly carried into a safer distance as its star grew hotter. If so, then even its survival is not entirely its own. It is a gift, a consequence of being caught in someone else's gravity. Like a leaf drifting on a river, moved by currents it cannot see. Or maybe it was always far enough. Maybe its star's growth has only just reached it. A delayed threat, a danger that has not yet finished its work. That possibility is almost haunting. A planet living on borrowed time. its survival nothing more than a temporary stay of execution. If you could walk there now, you might feel that unease in the air, the sense that the world itself knows it is too late, that the star above is writing its final chapter. You think of Earth again. Our own sun, though younger than this one, is not immortal. It too will brighten, swelling into a red giant that will boil our seas and strip our skies. Survival here is not permanent. It is only temporary. And so this planet, orbiting its tired star, becomes a vision of our own future, a reminder that survival, no matter how improbable, has limits. And yet, there is another perspective. What if the planet's survival is not a mistake, but a kind of wisdom? What if its orbit, its timing, its improbable persistence are not accidents, but examples of resilience written into the physics of worlds? Then perhaps its star is not just a threat, but a partner. Together they have danced for billions of years, each shaping the other, the star providing the pull, the heat, the slow, steady ticking of time, the planet providing the orbit, the silent witness, the shadow against the light, a dance that should have ended, but somehow continues. You close your eyes and imagine that dance. Imagine being on the surface, watching the star rise in the thin sky, larger than our sun, heavier with age. Imagine the colors it might cast, not the bright gold we know, but something deeper, more orange, a fire with embers in it. Each sunrise would feel like the memory of a younger flame, carrying the weight of billions of years. To stand there would be to stand in the presence of time itself. And then you imagine the future. The star will grow hotter still. The balance will break. Survival will end. No planet can last forever against the death of its star. But that is not the lesson this world carries. Its lesson is simpler, quieter, that survival is not about forever. It is about lasting longer than expected, about defying destruction for as long as the balance will allow. That is what this planet has done, and what Earth will do, until our own star writes its final chapter. The more you sit with this, the more you feel a strange comfort. Destruction in the universe is not personal. It is not cruelty. It is simply the flow of time, the work of gravity and fire. And within that flow there is room for worlds to last longer than they should. There is room for borrowed time, for fragile balances, for improbable survivors. And isn't that enough? This planet, circling its ancient star, tells you that it is, that survival, even if temporary, even if improbable, is still survival. That persistence itself has meaning, even if the end is certain. And as you let your mind drift, you realize that this is true for everything, worlds, stars, and even us. For now, the planet lingers. The star still burns. The orbit still holds. And against all odds, the story continues. You find yourself lingering on the thought that this planet is more than rock, more than orbit. It is a mirror, held up quietly in the darkness, reflecting truths you are almost reluctant to face. When you look at it, you are not only seeing a survivor, you are seeing yourself. Humanity has always imagined permanence. We build monuments of stone, believing they will last forever. We write histories as though words can outlive the crumbling of empires. We even talk about Earth as though it is fixed, as though the ground beneath us is absolute. But the truth is harder. The ground is moving. The continents drift, the air thins and thickens. The oceans rise and fall. Our world, like this distant planet, is fragile in its survival. We pretend at permanence only because the alternative is too vast to hold in our minds. Yet here is proof, circling an ancient star, a planet that wears its improbability openly, that survives in defiance of mathematics. It reminds you that survival does not always mean strength. Sometimes it means balance. Sometimes it means chance. And sometimes it simply means persistence. The quiet refusal to disappear. Imagine standing on its surface. The sky above would hold that swollen, aging star. Perhaps nearby giants would loom on the horizon. Faint but immense, their gravity always tugging at this smaller world. You would feel the weight of survival in the air, the way silence clings to landscapes that should have ended long ago, and as you breathe it in, you would understand that to live here is to live with ghosts, not of people, but of possibilities. Every end that could have happened but didn't. You realize that Earth too carries those ghosts, every asteroid that missed by chance, every solar flare that burned away in emptiness instead of striking us, every pandemic that did not erase us. We survive not because we are invincible, but because improbability sometimes chooses in our favor. We are in our own way, as unlikely as this world. The thought is unsettling. We like to imagine that survival is earned, that we exist because of strength or cleverness or design, but this planet whispers another truth. Sometimes survival simply happens, not because it should, but because it did. And once it does, it becomes the foundation for everything that follows. But you do not need to hear that as despair. It can be a kind of comfort. If survival is possible here against such odds, then perhaps survival is possible anywhere. Perhaps improbability itself is a resource we all share. Perhaps the fact that we exist at all is proof that the universe, for all its violence, makes space for persistence. Think about the stories humanity tells. Myths of great floods that nearly ended everything. Legends of fire raining from the sky. Even in our oldest memories, we carried the knowledge that survival is fragile, that endings are always near. And yet, those stories are still told, passed from one survivor to another. Like the orbit of this world, they repeat. They defy the silence. As you picture the planet circling its star, you wonder how long it has been unseen, how many billions of years it orbited without witness, without meaning, until one day a telescope on a tiny blue world far away caught its faint signal. For all those eons, its survival had no audience. It was simply a fact, silent and unnoticed, and yet that did not make it less real. That too feels like a mirror. Humanity often imagines meaning only when it is seen, when it is recorded. But the universe does not need an audience. Survival, persistence, existence, they carry weight even in silence. Perhaps that is what unsettles you most about this planet. It survived without reason, without intention, without story. And yet, because you see it now, it has become a story. You have given it meaning. You have turned its improbable orbit into a lesson, into a mirror, into a reflection of yourself. That is what humans do. We find ourselves in the stars. And maybe that is the point. This planet is not extraordinary in its surface or in its composition. It is extraordinary because it still exists. That alone makes it remarkable. And when you realize that, you realize something else. We are the same, ordinary, fragile, improbable, but still here, still circling the star that gives us life, still telling stories in the darkness. The planet continues its orbit, indifferent to your wonder. It does not know it should not exist. It does not know it carries meaning. It simply moves, quietly, steadily, another year, another billion. But you standing here, watching, listening, cannot escape the lesson it offers. That survival itself is enough. That persistence is beauty. That improbability is not failure, but possibility. And so you drift away, carrying its silence with you. A silence that is not empty, but full, full of what it means to exist at all, even when you should not, full of what it means to see yourself in a world that refuses to fall. The mirror closes. The planet grows small again in the distance, but the reflection remains. You let the planet drift farther in your view, not because you want to leave it, but because its orbit tells a deeper story than its surface ever could. The real mystery lies not in what the world looks like, but in how it continues to move, how it traces a path that should have fractured long ago. Orbital mechanics is often described as orderly. Planets circle stars in neat ellipses, their paths predictable, their futures calculable. We look at the solar system and see a kind of clockwork, worlds turning in steady rhythm, gravity keeping them in line. But when you zoom in closer, when you let the mathematics run for billions of years, that neatness begins to fray. Orbits are not eternal. They wobble, they stretch, they decay. The system you see now is not the system you will see in the far future. This planet is proof of that tension. It exists on the edge of chaos. If you were to run a simulation of its orbit forward through time, the paths would branch into uncertainty. Some futures show it being ejected into deep space, cast away from its star. Others show it spiraling inward, torn apart by tidal heat. Still others end in collision, smashed against one of its larger neighbors. By probability alone, one of those futures should already have come to pass. But it hasn't. The planet continues. Scientists call this kind of survival chaotic stability. It sounds contradictory, but it is real. A system can be unstable in the long term, yet stable enough in the short term to appear calm. Imagine a coin spinning on a table. At any moment it could wobble and fall, but for now it balances in motion. That is this planet spinning in chaos, yet somehow refusing to collapse. You imagine what it would be like to live under that kind of uncertainty, to wake each day under a sky that could, at any time, shift toward catastrophe, to know that your world survives not because it is safe, but because it has not yet fallen. But then you realize you already live that way. Earth, too, is a world of chaotic stability. Our orbit is stable for now, but the solar system is not immune to drift. Small changes in the paths of giant planets could one day alter ours. The asteroid belt holds bodies that could reset our history with a single impact. The sun itself is a chaotic variable, pulsing and changing in ways that threaten our atmosphere. We too live not in certainty, but in the illusion of it. And so, the planet becomes a lesson, not just about itself, but about us. That stability is not forever. That safety is not absolute. That survival is always perched on the edge of collapse. Astronomers run the numbers again and again, trying to find why the collapse hasn't come yet. Some propose that there are hidden harmonies in the system, resonances that cancel out the chaos, like dancers who lean at just the right angle to keep each other upright. Others suggest that the planet may have shifted orbits in the past, dodging destruction by luck, and landed in a pocket of temporary calm. Whatever the reason, it remains a riddle, a reminder that our models, no matter how advanced, do not capture everything. You drift a little farther, watching the star and its family of planets turn together. From a distance, it looks calm, serene, but you know now that serenity is an illusion. Beneath it lies tension, danger, imbalance, and yet there is something beautiful in that, isn't there? The idea that survival is not about escaping chaos, but about living within it. That the universe itself allows for pockets of order inside the storm. The more you think about it, the more you realize that this is not just a planetary truth, it is a human one. We too live in chaos of history, of chance, of change, and yet within that we find moments of stability. We build lives, families, civilizations. We write stories. We imagine futures. Not because we are safe, but because we persist despite not being safe. Like the planet, we orbit in uncertainty, and that is enough. As you drift back from the system, letting its light fade, you find yourself humbled. This world should have been destroyed. It should have been a ruin, a fragment, a ghost. But it isn't. It lingers, walking the edge of chaos with a grace that feels almost deliberate. And in that grace, you see yourself. Perhaps the universe is not a place of inevitability after all. Perhaps it is a place where even the most fragile paths can last longer than anyone expects. Perhaps improbability is not an exception. It is the rule. The planet completes another orbit. The star still burns, and you, watching from afar, realize that survival is not about certainty, but about persistence inside the storm. And sometimes, persistence is enough. You drift in thought, letting the planet fade behind your eyes, and yet it lingers, not as an image, but as an idea, a world that should not be here, circling a star that has burned far past its prime. And you cannot help but think about what that means for us, for Earth, for our own fragile hold on existence. Because every planet tells a story of time, and time is not kind. Worlds form, worlds endure, worlds end. The lifespans of planets are written not only in their rocks but in their stars. And this one, this improbable survivor, offers you a glimpse of the endings that wait for all of them. Think about what it means for a star to grow old. At first, stars are stable, long stretches of balance between the inward pull of gravity and the outward push of nuclear fire. But that balance is temporary. As a star ages, its fuel runs thin. The fire shifts, the pressure changes, and slowly, inevitably, the star grows hotter, larger, less forgiving. Planets that once thrived in its warmth begin to falter. Their atmospheres evaporate. Their seas vanish. Their surfaces bake under skies too bright to bear. Earth itself will not escape this. And so, when you look at this distant world, still circling, still lingering, you are not just seeing a survivor, you are seeing a preview, a rehearsal for the play our own world will one day perform. It is a planet living in the shadow of its star's slow death, and one day we will too. You let yourself imagine Earth in that far future. The sun, swollen, casting a light not golden but red and heavy, pressing down on seas that shrink into steam. The land cracked and bare, plants curling into dust. The sky filled with storms of fire. If humanity still exists by then, it will not be here. Earth, by then, will be a ghost world. A planet that lasted longer than it should have, but not forever. And yet, this other planet tells you something else. That even in those endings there can be delay, that survival can stretch further than the numbers predict. Maybe Earth, too, will last longer than the models say. Maybe improbability will choose us again, as it has before. But even if not, even if survival is only temporary, there is still something profoundly moving about persistence. To circle a star for billions of years, knowing that collapse waits ahead, is not failure. It is endurance. It is beauty. It is meaning. And maybe that is the secret this planet offers you. That survival is not about permanence. It is about presence. It is about being here now against every odd. This world is not remarkable because it will live forever. It is remarkable because it lived this long. And when you think about that, you realize the same is true of us. The planet whispers a truth we often ignore. You do not need to be eternal to matter. You only need to persist long enough to leave echoes, long enough to tell a story, long enough to exist at all. From orbit, the world still looks quiet. The star still burns. The silence still holds. But you know what waits ahead. You know that the end will come, as it does for all things. And yet, for now, for this moment, the planet circles on, and that is enough. You feel yourself breathing slower, calmer, as the thought settles in. You too are a survivor in improbable balance. You too walk a world that should not still exist. You too are part of persistence in the face of collapse. And maybe that realization is not frightening, but freeing. Because survival is not about escaping endings. It is about stretching the space between them, about finding beauty in the orbits that should not be, in the lives that should not last, in the worlds that remain even when they should be gone. You let the thought drift into silence. The planet, the star, the improbable orbit, all fading back into the distance, and yet the lesson remains. Nothing lasts forever, but some things last longer than they should, and sometimes that is all it takes to change everything. You close your eyes and think about the word improbable. It carries with it a sense of fragility, of something unlikely, something temporary. But the longer you linger on this planet, the more you realize that improbability is not a weakness. It is a law in itself, a law written into the universe as surely as gravity. Consider the scale of it all. Hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone, trillions of galaxies spread across the cosmos, and each star with its planets, each planet with its chances. Against that backdrop, Improbability is not rare, it is guaranteed. Somewhere, worlds will survive longer than they should. Somewhere, orbits will hold when they should collapse. Somewhere, life will bloom when it should have been extinguished. This planet is one of those places, a reminder that the universe, for all its violence, is also a factory of exceptions. Astronomers build models, they run simulations, they calculate probabilities with precision, but the universe does not follow their neatness. It spills over the edges, it breaks its own rules. And that is what this planet represents, not a flaw in physics, but the reminder that physics itself is written on a canvas too vast for us to see all at once. What looks impossible in isolation becomes inevitable in infinity. You let the thought stretch across your mind like starlight. Improbability is not the exception, it is the rule. Every survivor, every echo, every strange persistence in the cosmos is proof of that. Think about Earth. The odds that life should emerge here were slim. The odds that it would survive asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, ice ages, mass extinctions, slimmer still. And yet, here we are, breathing, thinking, asking questions about a distant world we will never touch. By the numbers, we should not exist. And yet, improbability has carried us this far, just as it has carried this planet, just as it will carry others. It shifts the way you see the cosmos, not as a place ruled by certainty, but as a place where certainty and chance weave together. Gravity pulls, orbits decay, stars evolve. But within those laws, improbability sneaks through, leaving survivors where none should be. Each improbable planet is a signature, proof that the universe is stranger and wider than we allow ourselves to imagine. You picture this world again, circling its weary star. To the eye it looks ordinary, just another sphere of rock or gas or dust depending on its nature. Nothing about its surface screams miracle. And yet that ordinariness is exactly what makes it profound, because it shows that miracles do not need to be flashy. Sometimes they are quiet, hidden in plain sight, disguised as normality. It makes you think of your own life, your own place in this improbable chain. How many times did survival hinge on chance? The right ancestor avoiding death by accident, the right strand of DNA passing forward, the right storm breaking at the right time. You are the result of uncountable improbabilities, stacked on top of each other, just as Earth is, just as this planet is. And when you look at it this way, improbability is not fragility, it is heritage, it is legacy. You let the silence deepen around you. The planet turns, the star glows, the orbit holds, and you realize that improbability is not something to fear, but something to honor, because it is the reason you are here to see it all. There is something humbling in knowing that the universe does not owe us survival. That survival itself is a gift, fragile and undeserved. But there is also something empowering, because improbability does not mean impossibility. It means possibility, stretched thin, but still real. And as long as it is real, survival remains. You drift back, watching the planet shrink in the distance again. It will not last forever. None of them do, but it has lasted this long, and that is enough. Enough to remind you that improbability is not weakness. It is the quiet law that shapes everything we are. And so, you take one last thought with you. The planet should not exist, but it does, and that simple fact is proof that the universe is not as rigid as we think. It makes room for survivors. It makes room for echoes. It makes room for you. You let the planet recede into the background of your mind, but you can still feel its pull, not the gravitational kind, but something quieter, the kind of pull that comes from recognition. Because as much as this world exists out there, circling its old star, it has also begun to exist inside you. It is no longer just a planet. It has become a question, a mirror, a challenge. What does it mean to look at survival this way? Not as a certainty, not as a product of design, but as an accident of improbability. For humanity, the answer is uncomfortable. We prefer to believe we are here for a reason, that our world was made for us, that survival was not just possible but inevitable. But when you look at this other planet, you see a truth harder to hold. Survival is fragile. It is not guaranteed. It is a balance that can tip at any moment. And yet, that does not make it meaningless. In fact, it makes it more meaningful, because to exist without guarantee is to exist with weight. Every orbit becomes significant. Every breath, every day, every stretch of survival carries importance simply because it could have ended but didn't. You imagine for a moment, if there were beings on that planet, not human, not like us, but life in some form, what would survival mean to them? Would they understand the danger written into their skies? Would they sense the thinness of their balance? Or would they live, unaware, under the quiet miracle of a world that should have been destroyed but wasn't? Perhaps they would tell their own stories of permanence, their own myths of inevitability, not knowing that their very existence was borrowed from improbability. And then you think, aren't we the same? For most of human history, we lived without knowledge of orbital mechanics. Without understanding that Earth itself is temporary, we built civilizations as though they would last forever, not realizing they were as fragile as the soil beneath them. Only now, with our telescopes and models, do we glimpse how thin the thread really is. Only now do we see mirrors like this planet, reminding us that survival is not destiny but chance. And yet, even with that knowledge, there is beauty, because survival is not about certainty. It is about persistence. The planet persists. Earth persists. You persist. And that persistence is enough to fill the silence with meaning. Think about what it means for humanity to look outward. When we gaze at the stars, we are not just searching for new worlds, we are searching for reassurance, proof that survival is possible even in the harshest corners of the cosmos. And when we find a planet like this, improbable and lingering, it is like hearing an echo that says, yes, it can be done. Survival stretches farther than you think. That changes the way you see our own future. Earth will not last forever. One day the sun will outgrow us. One day the balance will break. But this planet reminds you that there may be more time than you expect. That improbability can grant reprieves, extensions, second chances, and maybe, just maybe, those reprieves are enough to allow us to carry survival elsewhere, outward, beyond Earth, into the wider cosmos. You feel a quiet shift inside you. This distant planet circling its weary star is not a tragedy waiting to happen. It is a teacher. It tells you that fragility is not failure, that impermanence is not meaningless, that survival is possible, even where the odds deny it. And if it is possible there, it is possible here. You imagine Earth millions of years from now. Perhaps humanity has left. Perhaps it has evolved. Perhaps it has vanished. But the planet remains, orbiting still, carrying echoes of life in its stones and air. It, too, will one day become a survivor longer than it should have been. And when that happens, it will join the quiet choir of improbable worlds, planets that should not exist, but do. And that thought is strangely comforting, because it means we are not alone in our fragility. Across the cosmos, countless worlds share it. Some will fall early, some will linger longer, some will persist against every odd. Survival is not unique to us. It is a thread woven throughout the universe, and that makes you feel less small, less temporary, more connected to the vastness you drift within. As you let the planet fade into starlight, you hold on to that feeling, a reminder that survival, improbable as it is still survival, and that even in a universe built on collapse, there is room for persistence. There is room for stories like ours. The orbit continues. The star still burns, and the lesson lingers quietly in the dark. You drift deeper into silence, and the thought begins to settle in. Nothing lasts forever. Not planets, not stars, not galaxies. Everything that exists carries its ending inside it, waiting. This is not cruelty. This is not tragedy. It is simply the rhythm of the cosmos. And yet, seeing this improbable planet circle its weary star makes you realize something essential. endings do not erase meaning. Imagine the final moment of this world. Perhaps its star swells into a red giant, spilling fire across the system until the planet's surface boils. Perhaps a wandering neighbor, tugged slightly off balance, finally collides with it, smashing it into fragments. Or maybe the long game plays out. Tidal stress fractures it, orbit by orbit, until it shatters slowly into rubble. Whatever the ending, it will come. And yet, when it does, will those billions of years of persistence vanish as though they never happened? No, they will have mattered, even if no one was there to see them. You think of Earth again. One day, our story will end. Maybe quietly, as the sun grows hotter and oceans fade. Maybe violently, in a sudden catastrophe. But no matter the ending, what came before will not disappear. Every orbit, every life, every story, it will all have mattered. The meaning of survival is not erased by its ending. It is written into the time that was lived. This is the paradox the planet whispers to you, that permanence is not required for significance. A flower blooms and fades, yet it still carries beauty. A star burns and dies, yet it lights worlds while it lasts. A planet survives against every odd, and even if it finally falls, its defiance was real. As you drift in thought, you begin to see the universe differently, not as a place of endless destruction, but as a place of endless persistence in the face of destruction. Worlds rise, fall, linger longer than they should. Stars ignite, collapse, explode, galaxies collide and reform. And through it all, the story is not only about endings, but about the improbability of what survives between them. Perhaps that is why this planet feels like more than stone and orbit. It carries a lesson about time itself. Time is not only the measure of decay, it is also the measure of persistence. Every second this planet continues, it writes another line of defiance. Every orbit it completes is a record of survival, written into the silence of space. You let yourself picture the planet in its earliest days again, a young world still molten, battered by impact, struggling to cool, its star brighter, angrier, pouring more radiation than comfort. By all accounts, it should have failed early, and yet it didn't. Then imagine the middle of its life, when its orbit was tested again and again by the pull of nearby giants, by the chaos of resonance. Again it should have failed, but it didn't. Now imagine it today, still here, still circling, a survivor of billions of years of trials. Each era should have been its last, but it wasn't. That history cannot be erased by its eventual end. You breathe slower now, calmer, letting that realization sink in. Maybe survival is not about forever. Maybe survival is about long enough to write a history. Long enough to carry echoes, long enough to matter. And isn't that the story of everything? We survive long enough to leave imprints on each other, on our world, on the universe. We do not need permanence to have significance. This planet is proof of that. Its orbit will end one day, but its persistence has already left a mark on astronomers, on science, on you, listening in the dark. You open your eyes again to the silence of space. The planet continues its path. The star glows faint but steady, and you feel for the first time that endings are not failures. They are simply closures. What matters is not how long something lasts, but that it lasted at all. This improbable world should have been destroyed billions of years ago. It wasn't. It endured. And even when it finally falls, that endurance will remain part of the universe forever. You let the image of the planet linger, its silent orbit turning inside your thoughts, and then you shift the question inward. What does this mean for us? For humanity? For the fragile world we stand on, and the fragile future we dream about? Because if this planet teaches anything, it is that survival is not fixed. It is not promised. It is not something the universe hands out freely. It is something snatched from the edges of chaos, held briefly, and then surrendered again. Earth has done this. We have done this. And someday, Like this improbable survivor, we will face the certainty of endings. But unlike the planet, we are not bound to one orbit. We carry the strange power to imagine survival beyond our single star. That is what makes this reflection so sharp. Looking at this world, you see the limits of survival when it is tied to a single system. The planet cannot leave. It cannot run. It cannot outlast its star. It can only endure until it no longer can. But you, humanity, you hold the possibility of something different. You can build ships. You can carry seeds of life into other orbits, other suns. You can bend improbability further, stretching survival across worlds. And yet, the thought brings unease, because we are not ready. Not yet. We still live as though Earth is permanent, as though it cannot end. We cut forests, burn fuel, heat seas, as though this fragile balance will hold forever, but it won't. Earth itself whispers this truth every day in storms and quakes, in fire and ice. And now, this distant planet whispers it too. Survival is temporary. To continue, it must be carried. You imagine humanity thousands of years from now, scattered among stars, looking back at Earth the way we look now at this improbable survivor. A small blue world still circling its sun, beautiful but doomed. Perhaps by then we will see it with gratitude, not despair. Gratitude for having lasted long enough to give us the chance to leave. Gratitude for being improbable enough to allow us time to evolve, to build, to dream. But even if we never leave, even if our story ends here, this planet reminds you that survival is not about forever. It is about stretching improbability as far as it will go. If we last another century, another millennium, another 10,000 years, that too will be persistence against the odds. That too will matter. You think of the astronomers who found this planet. They did not expect it. Their models told them it should not exist. And yet, through the telescope, it was there. Survival revealed itself not as a certainty, but as a surprise. What if that is our story too? What if, against every model, every probability, humanity lasts longer than anyone believes? What if improbability continues to choose us? It is not impossible. After all, improbability is the law. This planet proves it. You close your eyes and imagine the future. A fleet of fragile ships drifting between stars. A colony clinging to life on a frozen moon. Generations looking up at alien skies, still telling stories about the improbable blue world that gave them birth. It may sound like fantasy, but so did this planet's survival, and yet it exists. Perhaps that is the lesson. Improbability does not ask for belief, it simply happens. As you drift farther back into silence, you begin to feel something you did not expect. Hope, not because survival is guaranteed, but because survival is possible, even when it should not be. If a planet can persist billions of years longer than the numbers allow, then perhaps humanity too can persist longer than we believe. You take one last look. The planet continues its orbit. Its star continues to glow. The balance still holds for now, and in that fragile persistence, you see our future, not certain, not eternal, but alive with possibility. The universe does not promise us survival, but it does not forbid it either, and sometimes improbability is enough. You linger on the thought that everything ends. It is a truth we often try to turn away from, but space has no interest in disguising it. Every star has its final flare, every galaxy its last collision, every orbit its breaking point, and every life, yours, mine, and the life of worlds, reaches silence in time. But this improbable planet tells you something subtle, something almost defiant. Endings do not empty existence of value. They fill it. You imagine the world's long history. Billions of years of circling, of holding against collapse, of persisting when the numbers said it should not. Each moment of that survival carried weight, even if no one was there to see it. Meaning does not depend on witness. The universe is filled with stories untold, lives unseen, worlds unrecorded. They matter anyway. They are written in stone, in orbit, in time itself. So why do we as humans demand permanence before we allow meaning? Why do we ask if anything lasts forever before we decide whether it matters? Look up at this planet and the answer is clear, because we are afraid of impermanence, afraid of endings, afraid that fragility makes us less real. But the planet whispers otherwise. Fragility is not weakness. It is truth, and truth is what gives value. Think of Earth. Our lives are fragile. Our civilizations are temporary. Our planet itself is impermanent. But does that erase the sunrise you saw yesterday? The laughter you remember from a friend? The beauty of oceans, mountains, skies that hold your gaze? No, it makes them sharper. It makes them brighter. Because you know they will not last, you see them as they are, improbable gifts of persistence. This planet is the same. It should have been rubble. It should have been gone. Instead, it lingers, circling quietly, proof that survival, even when temporary, is profound. You do not need forever to matter. You only need long enough to orbit, long enough to live, long enough to echo. And maybe that is the deepest lesson here. Not that survival denies endings, but that survival gives them context. A flower blooms brighter because it will fade. A star burns more beautifully because it will collapse. A planet is more extraordinary because it lasts beyond the odds, but still within time. Existence is valuable, not despite endings, but because of them. You close your eyes and imagine yourself standing there again on that improbable world. The horizon stretches wide and silent. The star above, swollen and dim with age, presses its tired light across the sky. You breathe the air, if there is any, or feel the silence of vacuum pressing against your suit, if there is not. And in that moment, you understand, this is not permanence. This is presence. The two are not the same. Presence is what gives existence meaning, not duration. To be here now, even briefly, is enough. The planet proves that, you prove that, Earth proves that, and in the quiet you feel something heavy ease inside you. The fear of endings does not need to diminish existence. It can illuminate it. Perhaps that is why we look outward at all. When we gaze at the stars, we are not searching for immortality. We are searching for perspective, for mirrors that remind us that fragility is universal and that survival, however brief, is worth wonder. This improbable planet is one such mirror, a world that shows us we are not alone in our impermanence, that endings are everywhere, and yet survival persists anyway. The orbit continues. The silence remains, and as you drift away again, you feel the lesson close around you. Impermanence does not erase value. It creates it. This planet should have been destroyed billions of years ago. It wasn't, and that fact, fragile and temporary as it may be, is enough. You drift one last time toward the planet. It hangs there, steady, circling its ancient star, as it has for billions of years, a survivor in silence, a world that should not exist, but does, and as you watch, you feel the final truth settle in. The universe is not built for survival. It is built for change, for endings, for collapse. Stars burn through their fuel, planets break apart, orbits decay, and yet, in the middle of all that inevitability, persistence still finds a place. Worlds last longer than they should, lives stretch further than the odds predict, and stories, fragile as they are, echo long after their endings. This planet's survival is not a contradiction of the universe. It is part of it. It is proof that improbability is not weakness, but possibility, that even in a cosmos of endings, there are chapters that last longer than expected, and those chapters matter. You think again about Earth, about your own life, your own world. You too are improbable. Your ancestors survived dangers they should not have. Your planet avoided catastrophes it could not have planned for, and now you breathe here, now because improbability chose you. That realization is humbling, but it is also freeing. You are not here because you were promised survival. You are here because persistence happened, and that is enough. This planet, circling far away, becomes a kind of reassurance that even if endings wait for all things, survival can still stretch further than you imagine. That presence matters more than permanence. That existence, even when fragile, is extraordinary. You let your gaze soften. The planet shrinks in the distance, its orbit invisible now, its star a dim glow among countless others. And yet, though your eyes leave it, the lesson remains. You will carry it with you, the way starlight carries the memory of its origin across billions of years. That lesson is simple, but heavy. Survival is never certain, but it is always meaningful, and improbability, far from erasing existence, gives it weight. The fact that you are here, listening, thinking, breathing in this moment, is as improbable as that distant world still circling its star. And yet, both are real, both persist, both matter. So you drift away back into the wider silence of space. Calmer now. The fear of endings has softened, because endings are not the point. The point is the orbits that last longer than they should, the moments that echo, the persistence that stretches improbability into presence. This planet should have been destroyed billions of years ago. It wasn't. Neither were you. And in that shared survival, improbable and fragile, there is wonder enough to fill the universe.